Hello, this is a trip recap video for Max and Melissa's cross-European biking adventure. We started biking out of our back door in Copenhagen and headed north to Helsingør, took a little ferry across to Helsingborg. And before I continue, I'll say we're going to show you on the map where we went, what our route looked like, and then we're going to look at a bunch of photos. So, again, starting in Copenhagen, up to Helsingør, across on a ferry to Helsingborg, and then we went south instead of north here, so this line is not exactly correct, but we were following a national Swedish route that I don't think we remember the name of.
We'll look it up and put it in the video description box.
Sure. And we biked across to Karlskrona, where we took a overnight ferry to Gdynia. And I guess to give a little more context, our original goal was to bike to Italy, and even potentially to bike to Italy and then do a mountain biking trip after we got there. And you might think, why are you going to Poland if you want to get to Italy? And we decided to take a more eastern route to avoid the steepest part of the Alps. And there also was there is a route called the Eurovelo 9 that we followed for most of our trip that goes all the way from Gdansk down to Croatia, and we deviated a bit, but we'll get there in a moment. So we started in Poland in Gdynia, that's where the overnight ferry dropped us off, and then we biked to Gdansk. Then we took, actually, I think this was a little detour off the Eurovelo 9 to go to Malbork, and we'll talk more about why we did that later. Then we rejoined the Eurovelo 9, maybe around,
Shortly after Malbork.
Yeah.
The Eurovelo 9 also, it was following that river, and there were two versions of it, one on either side of the river, so I think we were on the less common side of it, but we were rejoined the Eurovelo pretty shortly after Malbork.
Yes. And then we biked to, what's this, Budgosnes?
Best not to attempt.
Yeah, best not to attempt.
On to Poznan, which we can pronounce that.
Yes, this is where Poznan is, which is a pretty big Polish city. And then we went down to, this looks like it should be pronounced Wrocław, but it's actually Wrocław, or something like that. Then this is where our Google Maps line ends. I don't remember exactly why it ends here, but we did continue, we promise, into, what is this, Czechia. And we went to Olomouc and Brno, and then Vienna, and then I think we went
pretty straight south.
Yeah, pretty straight south from Vienna.
Yeah. If you zoom in a bit, there's a bunch of towns that say Bad, which means bath, and we were following the part of the Eurovelo 9 during that section was called the bath route because it goes through so many of these thermal baths. And then, then when we crossed into Slovenia, Maribor was the first city we hit. So pretty straight shot down from Vienna south.
Did we go through Liegnitz?
No, we were exploring. We'll show some photos, but it was sort of this side region that had a bunch of castles with the route tags.
Nice. And this was pretty much all the Eurovelo 9 still. And we got to Maribor, and then went across to Ljubljana. And then at Ljubljana, I think, was our big deviation from the Eurovelo 9. The Eurovelo 9, I believe, goes to Trieste, and then follows the coast down into Croatia, but we decided instead to just cut straight west and basically hugged the coast more or less to Venice. Or not exactly hugged the coast, but sort of went through this area to Venice. And then we went to Ferrara, Bologna, and then we ended our biking in Florence. And didn't end up doing the mountain biking trip. The whole thing was maybe 1,500 miles and took us 7 weeks. And
yeah, we took 1 to 2 rest days each week to explore areas we were at. For any European viewers, it's about 2,500 kilometers that we did. Should we show them the photos?
Yeah, let's look at some photos.
Nice.
So we started with this photo because the beginning of the trip was slightly crazy. We quit our jobs. We gave our apartment 1 month notice, packed up our stuff, put it into a storage unit, and when we left our apartment, all we had in it was our biking stuff. And this is maybe an overview of what we brought with us. I think we ended up picking up a little bit more stuff as we continued, but this was almost everything.
Yeah, we each had 2 panniers, rear panniers, and a trunk bag, and a handlebar bag. You'll see a better shot of our bikes loaded up later.
Yeah. And this is a photo of me taking our moving out photos wearing my bike clothes because we were literally moving out of the apartment and just hopping straight on the bike. And here's a little bit of a photo of our bikes loaded up, but more it was just us being excited and naive about what we were about to experience. This is a photo from the ferry from Helsingør to Helsingborg into Sweden. An idea of how much crap we started out with. And we really liked Helsingborg, which is the first Swedish city that we stopped in. Had this beautiful castle, and there was a nice overlook point over the city. The one thing we didn't like was that this was the only place someone tried to steal our bike. And we scared them off before they could actually try to take it. But we were very surprised, and it was a funny moment because the Danes are always talking about how scary and dangerous Sweden is. And as Americans, we thought this was hilarious. We were like, oh yeah, haha, like Sweden's very dangerous.
Yeah, we'd been to Malmö a few times before and had always been very at ease there.
But it was the only place on the whole trip that someone at least started thinking about stealing our bike. So they didn't succeed, but it was actually helpful to put us a little bit more on our toes to start with, to be more safety conscious. And one of our first landmarks that we hit was the childhood home and birthplace of Tycho Brahe, a famous astronomer who was
top 5. We were told when we visited.
Top 5 astronomers of all time. And he actually spent most of his life in Denmark, I believe, but he was born in Sweden and grew up in Sweden. And here's his grave, nice mustache. And it was cool to run into something along our route pretty immediately. That was a nice little landmark. And I guess maybe one thing I'll say further is that we definitely enjoyed not trying to hit landmarks and just biking where we wanted to go and seeing what we ran into. That actually ended up making the things that we ran into even more fun, I thought, because we weren't being tourists in the traditional sense of going to the spot to see the thing. We were just biking around and would stop by random stuff, which was definitely fun.
Yeah, in addition to wanting to kind of cut to the far east of the Alps, I'd say the other thing that excited us was just that we hadn't spent much time in Poland or some of these other countries. So yeah, basically everywhere we went that was brand new to us.
Agreed. And we spent a lot of time near castles this whole trip. This was a really nice castle in Sweden that we camped right next to. In Sweden, you're allowed to wild camp. If you find a field that's unoccupied, you can just camp there. And we actually had a view of this castle from our camp spot.
This was that camp spot.
This was the camp spot, and you'll notice that I look a bit cold, and when we left, it was the last weekend of March, heading into Easter weekend, or Easter break, and in our heads we were thinking, this is European spring. We're going to do a spring trip. It's not true. This is winter still, and you'll see more evidence of that as we continue. After our bikes got stolen, we were very safety conscious, and so this was one of the initial ways we did grocery shopping, was by putting all of our crap into grocery carts and then wheeling it around with us in the grocery store so someone wouldn't steal it. So at the start we were very safety conscious, but by the end we just left our bags on our bikes, and so I joked that if someone tried to take it, they wouldn't get very far very fast because our bikes were so heavy, so I would just run after them and tell them, please let me have my bike back. But at this point
the setup also on the back of our bike started to look more and more janky and less enticing to steal. I think there's some photos later showing all sorts of extra calories lashed to the back.
Yes. This is a legendary aspect of Swedish grocery stores, which is that they have a whole tube section that apparently Swedish people like to eat out of tubes, or at least some of them do, and we love it. Because when you're out and about, traveling around, tubes are extremely practical. We love tube cheese. It's a great way to have cheese that doesn't spoil as quickly, that is more moist, and can go into basically any food.
Like every meal.
Any meal, just squirt a little of this stuff on, and it's great. And you I mean, if you're adventurous, we were not that adventurous, but if you are, you can see they have bacon tubes, tuna tubes, and all sorts of weird tubes. And this is the only country I think I've been to that has the tube section. We kept looking for it throughout our trip and couldn't find it anywhere else. So
we ended up with some weird alternatives in our quest to find a non-perishable cheese. The highlight was finding a canister that looked like whipped cream, but it was full of sour cream, like aerated, condensed sour cream, which was quite the experience to put that on top of burritos.
It was really weird because the only thing that you eat that is that texture is whipped cream, which is very sweet. And so when you put the sour cream that's whipped, like aerosolized, into your mouth, your brain is very upset. It cannot decipher the situation. But yeah, we were questing for non-perishable cheese throughout the whole time. Had various levels of success. This is just a photo of rural Sweden. Some very nice country roads here. Not a ton of people in Sweden in general. There are some big cities, but it's pretty rural, and there's a lot of really good biking in Sweden, I have to say.
Yeah, the routes we were following had a fair amount of kind of gravel or non-paved sections, which in general we liked in terms of staying just off the beaten path. But also the bikes we brought, they were just the bikes we had used for commuting back in Copenhagen, so they weren't really set up for gravel. So there were times where we regretted our gear for the roads we were on, but overall enjoyed having a quiet piece of this type of road.
Yes, and in Sweden it wasn't an issue because the ground was still mostly frozen, but as we continued it became a little bit more of an issue that our bikes were just road bikes as opposed to gravel or mountain bikes.
This was another campsite in Sweden. I think at this campsite we stopped pretty early in the day because we were still trying to kind of ease our way in and not overdo the mileage. So we were very happy when we found a picnic table to hang out at. This was our cooking setup, and we were overlooking a nice lake here.
Yeah, we wild camped in this field, which was nice. Although we had a slightly scary experience because we heard a somewhat loud explosion in the middle of the night. And
as Americans, we jumped to thinking it was gunshots.
Exactly, and I mean, in Sweden, some people do have guns because they, I think, do more hunting than in Denmark, but it was Easter weekend, so I think we decided it was actually just a firework. And this is the only picture I could find of a place called Max Burger, which is a very popular fast food place based out of Sweden, but has expanded to other countries. And the weather in Sweden while we were there was pretty bad, and we were also trying to take it pretty easy at the start and not go very far, so we ended up spending a lot of time just relaxing in the comfort of Max Burger and eating burgers.
Recharging our phones, brushing our teeth in our bathrooms, refilling water bottles.
You can see that we brought a lot of crap in, and you probably can almost see our bikes through the window, but not quite. And we started to really abuse every place that we stayed and just dry things out and spread all over the place and take gross showers and just we had a term for it. What was the term?
High utilization patrons or something, where we joked that like if there was any like instant coffee to go available in the room, we would take it with us. We probably left a little bit of like mildewy towels behind. We tried to get our money's worth and recover before going out camping again.
Yes. Well, yeah. This is a pro tip. You can dry out your shoes very effectively if you put a hairdryer in them. Another example of being high utilization occupants or whatever we were. And yes, we woke up and there was snow on our bikes, that was one of the moments we realized we were doing a winter European trip. It was a tough moment for us. Maybe, as Melissa alluded to, these were just our commuter bikes. These were the bikes we were biking to work each day. And I would say they were maybe on the upper end of commuter bikes in Copenhagen because people like to commute in really crappy bikes because it's very flat there. And yeah, but I think one thing I did want to mention is that these bikes we probably spent combined $350 buying them. And that actually served us very well because we were not super concerned about someone stealing the bike specifically.
Even though random people kept saying they looked nice.
Suspiciously
nice.
But these bikes were not nice. They were not very nice. Just generic road bikes.
This is a photo of the crossing from Karlskrona, Sweden into Gdynia, Poland. I was very excited about taking an overnight ferry. Max came to realize partway through the trip that was part of why we were doing the route. And yeah, we were a little bit nervous because we left our bikes on this rack that someone said was going to end up on the ferry, and we were skeptical, but the next morning we were there. And yeah, this was our stateroom. Stateroom. I don't forget what they call it in the Titanic, but it had chocolates on the pillowcases.
Yeah, all my coworkers were asking why we're going to go through Poland instead of just going through Germany straight south. And the answer is because Melissa wanted to do an overnight ferry. That's the answer. We also did try to avoid the steepest part of the Alps, but it was mostly for the ferry. We could have still avoided the Alps if we needed to and gone straight south. We'd also heard that biking in Germany isn't that amazing.
Yeah, so. I'd also done the southern section of Denmark down into Germany on previous trips, so I was excited to try something different. So a bunch of different reasons, but this ferry was part of it, and it more or less lived up to the hype, even though then we were a little sleepy probably the next day because it was to get the free breakfast, we had to get up at like 4:30 in the morning or something because it was docking at I think 6.
And when we arrived, it was snowing and sort of turning into more of sleet. And we
had built up that like if we can just get to Poland, we'll have good weather, and that was not the case when we arrived.
It was horrible, and we looked outside and we just said we're not going. We're gonna stay in the terminal until the weather gets a little better. And Melissa set up her sleeping pad to take a nap, and the people working in the station immediately became quite concerned. They're like, when are you going to leave? And I said, I'll leave when it stops snowing. And they were not.
There was a bit of a language barrier.
There was a language barrier, but even beyond that, they were just displeased with that mentality.
Americans in our station. What are we doing?
They were like, I promise we will leave today. That didn't work. But we were sort of right also because after that day of snowing, it got up to about 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Celsius, and was just beautiful for a week in Poland that first week we were there. And then it got much colder after that, and then eventually did get warmer because we actually reached spring weather, and we were also moving south, so it was getting warmer as we continued. But this is a photo of Gdansk, which was one of our favorite cities that we passed through. So beautiful. This giant building off on the right is a restored crane used to load and unload boats, and we didn't know what to expect of Poland. I think our expectations were based on ignorance. I think I was picturing a much more Soviet, communist-influenced culture with people wearing tracksuits and everyone being kind of unhappy and everything being very dark. But it reminded me a lot of Copenhagen. As it turns out, it was very light feeling, very nautical feeling, and people were pretty well off and seemed pretty happy. And yeah, it was one of our favorite cities. I don't know, do you want to add anything to that?
We have a couple more pictures of the city, so we can go through and see if it sparks interest. Oh yeah, this one's a cool one because it shows that a lot of the city streets had these really cool facades on the front of the building. And it's funny because in Copenhagen there's this one really popular tourist harbor called Nyhavn where there's all these bright colored buildings. And then yeah, Gdansk, it just felt like every road was that way. So highly recommend a visit. Felt a little bit more off the beaten path than going to someplace like Copenhagen.
I liked the sculptures that were on top of the roofs as well. That was sort of unique.
Another street showing good urban planning.
Yes.
Yeah. Not as many bike lanes around, but very walkable city. And yeah, we did. This was kind of our first. I think at this point we'd been biking for at least a week, and so we sort of covered and ate a lot of food and enjoyed the city.
And this was a impulse buy because I was feeling like I was missing something and decided to buy a toy to play with on the trip. So decided to buy a binocular because binoculars were too heavy to bring, and tried to use it every day, looking around a little bit. It was more fun. The part of Poland that we went through was quite flat, and it was definitely more fun when we were going through more hilly terrain to get to the top and look around at stuff.
This blue path behind Max was the bike path. So in northern Poland, there was still really good bike infrastructure on the Eurovelo 9, and then it's very deteriorated. But yeah, pretty impressive bike path to start out at least.
And the reason I was pausing is I do actually want to tell a little story, brief story, which is that Melissa's phone broke on the ferry, or no, right before we got on the ferry to Poland. And she had gotten the battery replaced shortly before, and they replaced it poorly. So she dropped it, and then it just completely broke because they did a bad job replacing the battery. So in one of the things that we did in Gdansk was go to a phone repair place, and they said we can't fix it, but we can ship it to a different place that can fix it.
Central workshop area.
But we weren't going to bike to that place, so we said, okay, ship it there, fix it, and then ship it to a different city that we are passing through, and then we would bike to intercept it. And it actually worked out perfectly. It was on Friday afternoon, and we were hoping that they would stay a little bit late. We were biking really fast, and Melissa ran in and had a working phone after. It took a while. It took like 10 days to ship it to the central location, do the fix, and then ship it to where we were going. But that was a nice little.
It added some an exciting side quest to our time in Poland.
Yes. Yeah.
This is Malbork Castle. It's the largest brick castle in the world. We detoured a little bit out of the way from Eurovelo 9, and we were very glad we did. We camped at a campground that was across the castle, and then spent the next day doing a self-guided audio tour. Super cool place. I think there's some more pictures, but yeah, lots of history. Regarding the different powers that kind of existed in this region, so a cool way to start our time in Poland.
Yeah, we took a self-guided tour, which is really fun. Just a massive castle with a lot of cool stuff to look at in many different sections.
Yeah, like this courtyard, it looked a little bit like Hogwarts in my mind.
And we're starting to have our metabolisms increase, and this was a very whimsical lunch we had, which was chocolate cake, peanut butter, banana with milk to wash it all down, and it was very tasty and started to get a little weird. Get a little weird on this trip.
Yeah, I think in general our standard lunch was usually some sort of like tortilla type substance because those don't get squished with then different like cheese and pepperoni and stuff on top. But we definitely, as we got hungry, started to be more and more creative. This is one of the more like single track sections we were on. Yeah, maybe not perfect for the type of bikes we were riding, but super beautiful. And yeah, we were ahead of the season for biking, so we didn't see very many people. We also took this picture because some of our American family and friends were like, oh no, like if you guys are biking for that long, like if someone was out for 7 weeks every day in the US, the chance that they would have some sort of bad car interaction, not necessarily a crash, but yeah, that it's not the safest thing to always be biking around. And this was an example where we were like, okay, this will put everyone's mind at ease that we are not going to get hit by any cars.
And I think maybe to add to that, one thing that we noticed through almost all of our bike trip, I think Italy might have been the one place where I didn't feel this way, but the drivers were just so respectful in general and gave us so much space, even when we were sharing a lane with them, especially compared to we're now in the US, and compared to in the US, the drivers are just not super respectful and don't give that much space, whereas often the European drivers throughout many of the countries we went through would actually turn on the turn signal, shift into the other lane, and then turn on the turn signal to go back as if they were passing an actual car. It's really nice. Was this Poznan?
I think so. Yeah, we really like Poznan. We never even really heard of it until we realized we were going to be biking through. But super nice city, this beautiful big square, which was common in a lot of the Poland cities that we went through. Yeah, I think we took a full recovery day here. If you go to the next slide, I think, we did some sort of whimsical things in the city on that recovery day, where this photo was actually taken from a croissant museum where we took they called it a class, but it was like a demonstration on how a specific type of croissant that was native to the city was created. And then we could see this clock tower from the window where at 12 each day, these goats come out and battle, and that seemed to be the big city attraction. It was fun.
And one thing we really enjoyed about Poland was that it was so cheap. Everything was very inexpensive, so we definitely indulged ourselves by staying in cities more, staying in little apartments that had a kitchen and a shower more, whereas later on we did more camping and did maybe a little bit less paid touristy stuff. But Poland was shockingly cheap. It was the cheapest country that we went through.
This was the next city we hit in Poland, Wrocław. You're better at saying it than me. But there's gnomes everywhere in the city that are kind of a nod to the communist past and the like anti-communist sentiments. Yeah.
All of the Polish cities we went through were really nice and unique, and all had very cute central areas that were very pedestrian focused. And I think towards the end, I was definitely getting a little tired of Poland. I don't know if I knew it at the time, but I mentioned that it was very flat. The land that we were going through in sort of western Poland was very flat. But one of the highlights of the landscape was that it was rapeseed season. So these beautiful yellow flowers were following us almost everywhere we went, which was really nice.
This is also Wrocław. We went on a nice evening walk, and yeah, just thought it was a beautiful city. And then we finally made it to the Czech Republic.
This was actually maybe the most excited we were on the whole trip because we spent a long time in Poland, and we had already spent time in obviously Denmark, but also Sweden, and this felt like really a stepping off point where we were now sort of into the heart of our trip, and we were super excited to make it to Czechia, and we were very cold and wet also because I mentioned the weather got really good for a week, it became bad again after that. And we didn't bike in the rain that much, but we did a little bit. And we were really excited, nonetheless. And this was our first first reader in Czechia, who was very nice to us.
Yeah, I think we went into the supermarket purely just to try to warm up our hands enough, because we're not camping tonight. We want to book a hotel, but our phones were too wet and our hands were too cold, so we were wandering the aisles and found this cute guy.
This was a really cool castle that we stayed in Czechia, where a nice couple was slowly restoring the entire thing and had started with a few rooms that they could rent out as a Airbnb type thing, and yeah, it was just a really cool spot. I remember enjoying a lot. This is so we're eating a lot of food, and we were not skimping on food, I would say. This is a nice Nutella banana crepe, but the thing that I find funny about this photo is that I'm making a silly face, and I'm making a silly face because we were always trying to take photos of the food that we were eating, but we would always take a bite before we could take the photo. So here I am pretending that I hadn't already taken a bite, making a silly face as a result.
This was another really good meal. We showed up at this it's like a family summer camp, but it was early in the season and there weren't really anyone there, so we were expecting the facilities to be pretty shut down. But then they had a full kitchen and the food was really affordable and it was good.
But the road to get there was the worst section of road that we experienced on the entire thing.
It was funny that you're calling it a road. It was like a hiking path.
It was... You could squint at it and say that it was cobblestones, but what it really was just a pile of rocks in a line. It was horrible.
And it was snowing.
It was really bad. It was really bad. This was one of the top attractions that was not a city that we got to go to, that was just along the Eurovelo 9.
It's actually marked on if you go to the Eurovelo 9 website, this was one of the ones that was shown, so we have to stop here.
Just a really big cave system. I think sandstone cave system with stalactites and stalagmites and pools of water, and the start of the tour was walking, but the second half was by boat. We got to go in boats in the cave. Unfortunately, the entire tour was in Czech, so we missed out on some good jokes, I think.
That was the coolest spot where the stalactite and stalagmite had almost met, and I think they were telling us about it, but yeah, we didn't understand.
Maybe.
This was, I think, a sinkhole where the cave had actually caved in, and then right around here was where we transitioned into the boats for the second part of the tour.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I remember a Polish friend said that we should be eating cheap Thai food in Poland, but we liked it so much that we were able to actually find it all over the place. That certain ethnic foods are very cheap throughout various parts of Europe, and I think this was maybe Thai-inspired noodles, and we were really hungry, and it was pretty good.
It's funny because until Italy, I would say almost every picture we have where we're eating lunch, that means that it was raining out, because it was if it was raining, so that picture where Max had taken a bite of the crepe, and then this one, both those days were rainy days, we're okay, let's find a lunch spot inside and get out of the rain.
That's a good point.
Oh, this was a cool area. When we looked at the map, we didn't quite understand the Eurovelo 9 route because it gets almost the Austrian border in Czechia, and then it kind of deviates and follows this little peninsula part, and we're like, why is it going so out of the way when we could just cut in? But we decided to go for it, and we were really happy that we didn't cut that part out, because it visited, I think, 3 different castles and then the surrounding grounds in the forest. And this was a hunting lodge that was attached to one of the castle grounds. Those windows up there were actually rooms that people would have breakfast before starting their hunt back in hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, people would stay up in the top part, which is cool. And yeah, we just really enjoyed having landmarks to check out as we were biking, just show up as we were biking along.
Yeah, this was one of those castles that day went by. we ate lunch right out in front. And then we made it to Austria.
Yeah, you can actually see a cool little sign here that said that this is the Eurovelo 13, but I think there was also a sign for the Eurovelo.
Yeah, this was actually less about the specific sign and more showing that the style of sign changed. So like we had been looking for yellow ones, and then we just switched to looking for green. I think this is a testament to both Austria and the Czech Republic had quite developed sections of the Eurovelo compared to like Poland. It was like, oh, eventually we want to have a fully marked route, but we don't have one yet. Whereas here it was like so well marked that they even go make sure to be looking for different style markings that way people don't get lost.
And we spent maybe 3 nights with a friend of Melissa's who she studied abroad with in Ecuador, who's Austrian and lives in Vienna, and she took us out to this really delicious dinner, and yeah, we had a really nice time with her.
Yeah, it was cool to visit local people, to have sort of a more insider view into the city, and yeah, also to take a shower and yeah, just feel a little bit more at home in someone's home than when you're camping or staying in hotels.
Yes, this was a important side quest throughout the trip, which was that in the US, we often will call certain types of pastries Danishes. In Denmark, most pastries are called Vienna bread, because that's where the Danes imported the idea of laminated dough from Vienna. So we went to Vienna, and we were definitely expecting them to call it something else, to say, oh, this is the French pastry or something like that. But they claimed it. They said, no, we invented laminated dough.
Yeah, we found the source, went all the way to the source of the dough.
Even in Poznan, they had the croissant museum because they invented some special kind of croissant there. So apparently Austria is where they came up with it. So we had to give it a try, and I think the conclusion was it was very good, but maybe the Danes have it a little bit more down at this point, at least with variety.
They've taken more like creative license and gone beyond just laminated dough to instead having like really good fillings and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But the pastries were still good.
Oh yeah, definitely still good.
We went to an art museum while we were in Vienna. Since we were there for 3 or 4 days, we were able to do more than just the usual kind of like grocery shopping and cleaning the clothes, and instead actually taking the culture. So this was an impressionist painting we both liked. And this was silly. This was, I think, at the same art museum, and it looked a lot like our friend Verena, who was hosting us while we were in Vienna. So we took a picture just to show her that, like, we found a picture of you in the National Museum.
And this is us finally crossing the Alps. The next photo is the highest point that we got to, I think, on the whole trip, but it got pretty steep at this point, and I think I was very excited to have some up and down compared to how flat, especially Poland, had been, but yeah, Czechia was maybe a little bit less hilly, the part that we went through, than I expected. Although, we did have that one really amazing section in Czechia that was pretty hilly.
Yeah, I think this day was noteworthy because it was a long, sustained climb versus just being up and down. We'd actually stayed the night before, kind of right at the base of this, and gotten up and tried to tackle it first thing in the morning. And the night before was cool. We stayed with there's a site called Warm Showers that's a cyclist hosting network, and we stayed with the family there who barbecued for us and offered us the option of a tree fort sleeping above this river or their warm kitchen, both which were very nice offers. Yeah, this was that highest pass before we went back down the other side.
And there was snow, for sure, as we continued up still, although the weather was definitely getting a little bit better. You can tell that we're starting to strip down slowly. And Austria is really beautiful. Lots of nice mountains and green fields.
Oh yeah, we mentioned when we were talking about the route on Google Maps that part of the Eurovelo 9 section in Austria is also called the thermal baths route, because it passes this region that has a lot of naturally occurring thermal baths. So we took a day off, and this was one of the ones that you could just like buy a day pass to, and it was cool. It had a bunch of different pools with different temperature and like water properties based on the like minerals in the water, and then like a cold plunge you could do in between. Nice day off.
And this area was so popular with retired Austrians on e-bikes. Oh my gosh, that's what you do when you're old in Austria, is you go e-bike between different thermal baths, I think.
This was an example of us getting a little bit more janky with our packing, where we started to really prioritize just having as many calories as possible. So we have some nice Austrian pastry of some sort, and then some salty chips.
Bugles.
Made it to Slovenia.
Yeah, pretty excited to get to Slovenia, although immediately the bike infrastructure took a nosedive. We climbed a very steep hill. We had to push our bikes up a pretty decent amount of it, but luckily at the top we got a nice congratulations, and we had an amazing view from that spot to eat lunch. This is in Maribor, which was the first city that we stopped at in Slovenia, and this is actually supposedly the oldest grapevine in the world.
Their claim to fame.
And I hate to say it, but don't go to Maribor to see the oldest grapevine in the world. It's just not worth it. But Maribor was a beautiful city, super nice. Neither of us had ever been to Slovenia.
Yeah, we had no expectations, and this just kind of blew us away.
Yeah, and it was super nice. I think maybe I was a little bit hoping it would be cheaper than Austria, because it was going to be a less wealthy country, but it was just as expensive and just as wealthy. So I guess props to Slovenia.
Definitely started to get a little bit hillier. You can see some actual mountains off in the distance. It also, as the weather was warming up, we started to encounter more cyclists, because it was feeling more like the season where people were out bike touring. So we met some interesting characters along the way and at some campgrounds. Yeah, I think this photo might have been taken at one of the campgrounds. I don't remember, or around that area.
I think it was just the top of a hill.
Oh, okay.
But I think I was definitely surprised how beautiful Slovenia was and how wild it felt compared to Austria, for example, or Czechia. That it felt like there was much more wilderness-y nature in Slovenia, which I thought was really pretty. I wanted to see a wild
boar, but we never saw one.
Yeah, maybe a good thing. And you can see some big mountains off in the distance here, which we biked past, and we sort of wished we hadn't gone through the lowest part of the Alps when we saw these, because it was easier biking to go across the Alps where we did, but we didn't get to see that much of this kind of mountain. So
pros and cons for sure.
And this was a great little detour, which was in Ljubljana, the capital of Slovenia, because my favorite basketball player, Luka Doncic, grew up in Ljubljana and learned to play basketball on this very court as a child, and now he's a big superstar, and he redid this court and signed his name on it, and I got to check it out on my birthday weekend, so it was a little birthday present to me, which was nice.
This is also Ljubljana, very beautiful city, good walking historical area, kind of high street, all that. There's a castle up on the hill, and this was our first indication that we might be starting to get a little bit burnt out, because I remember both of us didn't really want to go up and see it. We were like, oh, we've seen a lot of castles, we'd rather just relax, which ended up becoming a little bit more of a narrative as the trip progressed. But yeah, the center of Ljubljana was very nice.
And Ljubljana is also surrounded by mountains, so beautiful setting, and yeah, just a really nice city that we did not explore very effectively.
And then we made it to Italy.
this was one of our big original objectives, was to make it to Italy, and we were pretty excited. Yeah, we actually accidentally passed into Italy in a spot where there was no sign and had to backtrack so that we could actually go take this photo. And not only did we make it to Italy, but the Eurovelo 9 has multiple names. Oh yeah, we haven't talked about any of the names, but one of the names is the Baltic to Adriatic. And this is the Adriatic. We made it. So I think this was when we sort of said we did the Eurovelo 9, even though we did deviate from it. I was very comfortable saying we did it because it just stopped being marked. So I said, all right, it's wherever we want it to go, as long as we make it to the Adriatic. And we made it to the Adriatic, whereas Melissa was sort of like, oh, we didn't totally finish it because we didn't go through Croatia at all. But whatever.
Yeah, the other name, so Max alluded to there being multiple names. The other name was the Amber Route because it followed like a historical trading route where people would move amber that was found in the Baltic down to the Adriatic, where it would then be taken to like different parts of Italy and the other countries surrounding the Adriatic to be traded and sold.
And I think also in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And we had been longing from the very beginning for the Italian gelato and the cappuccinos, and every time we would pass a biker going the other direction, we would joke about asking them, how is the gelato? Like, how are the cappuccinos? And finally, we achieved them. You can see the cappuccino right over here. Got a chocolate crepe. And our next stop was Venice, which was, I think, for me, I definitely was not ever set on going to Venice because I thought it was going to be very overhyped, and I always make fun of Venice because people say that it's sinking, so you have to visit it ASAP, but I always joke, we're all sinking, just some faster than others, so come on, get over yourself. But in all seriousness, Venice was awesome. We had a really nice time. My sister actually gave us a early wedding present that we spent on our trip to Venice, and we weren't being insanely cheap on this trip, but we were trying to not spend huge amounts of money throughout just because we didn't have any jobs lined up afterwards and had a wedding coming up as well. So, but this one we spent a bunch of money and did everything, including the gondola ride.
Yeah, this gondolier was a cool guy because we noticed this picture on his boat that looked like him when we asked about it, and he and his son were the first ever father-son pair to win. I guess there's like a series of gondola races each year, so they were the fastest gondoliers, but when we asked to go fast, he wouldn't take us extra fast, but he did sing to us, which we thought was like the standard thing, but then later we heard other tourists being like, hey, our gondolier's not singing, so we enjoyed that experience.
But it was a little suspicious because neither of us speak Italian, but we both speak some Spanish, which has a lot of vocabulary overlap, and he was saying some weird stuff about
in his song lyrics.
Yeah,
I thought maybe he was just making up something silly because he was talking about like eating a cat.
yeah, it was a little weird.
Fun experience.
There's a cute photo of us in his gondola, and
this was also in Venice. We took a picture of it just because we thought it was so silly.
So
be careful when you're going to that.
Yeah, be careful in Venice. So such a beautiful city, and such a unique city. We got to see the fireboat, the ambulance boat, police boat. We were hoping to see the mail delivery boat, but we didn't get to see it. And it's actually a bunch of different islands that are all connected by bridges, and every time you go over a bridge, you go to a different island. We did a walking tour to learn a little bit about the history of Venice, and yeah, pretty awesome. We recommend going, but I think
2027. Go before then.
Yeah, go before 2027 because that's when the cruise ships will be allowed to dock at Venice again, and people were saying that the cruise ships make the experience a lot less nice, although it's hard to say as a tourist if it would make it a lot less nice, but they said it was a lot busier, and the cruise ships are like taller than the tallest buildings in the city, which is a little bit awkward from a view standpoint.
Yeah, it was during COVID they stopped allowing them, and then the city is a little bit less crowded. Yeah, so just nicer for wandering around.
And we actually visited a good friend of mine in, what was the town's name?
Padua, which is near Venice.
Yeah, right outside of Venice. And then we headed to Ferrara, which is where this photo was taken. And I don't actually know why, but we just loved Ferrara. It's a sort of smaller city with this beautiful castle in the middle. And I think we were starting to encroach on tourist season. It was probably very early May at this point,
May in Italy.
which starts to become tourist season, and we were starting to value areas that were not touristy, especially Venice is notoriously touristy, but Ferrara, I don't think had any tourists in it as far as I could tell, and it was just, everyone was so friendly, and yeah, I still don't know exactly why, but we just love the city.
This was, I think, just past Bologna, because after Ferrara we went through Bologna, but hit it kind of midday, so we didn't stop. Or we stopped briefly, but we didn't stay overnight. And then this was, we found a little bed and breakfast that was just a bit off the route we were taking. So we're like, oh nice, it's only like a quarter-mile deviation, but it was up on this huge hill, like way down in that valley was the road we were on, and then I forget how many like meters of elevation gain we had to get up here, but I had to push my bike. But luckily the host was this like very friendly grandma from Italy who didn't speak any English, but gave us a lot of breakfast.
And a beautiful view at the top, so you've got to work to earn it.
Then as we were heading, this was kind of in the mountains to get over towards Florence, we passed, I think this is a reservoir, or maybe just a big lake, but had a leisurely picnic and went swimming.
Well, this is definitely a sign that by this point the weather was actually good weather. I think even before it was good, but it was starting to get hot in the sun, which was really nice.
Yeah, this was our like final big climb. What we see there is sort of the outskirts of the town surrounding Florence. So we were going to descend the next day. Like we camped up here, and then we were going to descend the next day down over the mountains.
Yeah, we had a really nice camping spot up here.
Yeah, and then when we got to Florence, we ended up staying at a campground kind of on the outskirts of the city because it was definitely the most affordable option, and it was a pool, and we were very excited to just hang by the pool. We were pretty exhausted. Yeah, kind of gave us some insight to where we were at emotionally. Do you want to talk more about just our experience in Florence?
Yeah, I mean, I think this trip wasn't so carefully structured by us, and there were many things that we wanted to do as part of the trip, which maybe watered down our motivation a little bit. So we wanted to do the Eurovelo 9, we sort of did that. We wanted to bike to Italy, we did that. And then the last thing that we were thinking of doing was this mountain biking trip that was sort of central Italy. It would have been...
We would have to go a little more south.
Yeah, significantly farther south from where we were, maybe 2 or 3 days of biking. And I just realized that I did not have it in me to go and do a sort of a whole new trip on top of this trip. That I was happy to keep biking, but I did not want to trade out our bikes and switch up our gear in order to do a mountain biking trip at the end of this already pretty long and ambitious trip. And Melissa was disappointed, but respectfully acquiesced to my wishes. But then
we knew we were going to be, at that point we had to decide what we were going to do next. We knew we were going to be moving back to the US, so it felt important to leave some reserves in the tank. And we also, as we were exploring Florence, just realized that we were no longer, that we kept wanting to just hang out by the pool instead of seeing the sights. So we realized we had sort of run the course of the trip. And we're basically ready to call it at that point.
Yeah. So we sold our bikes. And this was Melissa's bike. It's a giant branded bike with very skinny tires and flat handlebars. And there's me with my bike, which was a trek bike with slightly wider tires and drop handlebars. And this was a really sad moment, for me at least. Getting rid of the bike really felt like the end of the trip in a very definite way, that we weren't going to be biking anymore. And yeah, it was emotional. And we managed barely to make it into Florence to actually check out the sites. We almost
mainly it was
skipped
the pasta carbonara and the food that was bringing us into the city center, and then we just happened to see some sites.
Yeah, Italy is actually surprisingly cheap food-wise. It was the
Especially
second.
compared to coming from Denmark, I think.
It was the second cheapest country after Poland, just in general, which was very surprising.
The Czech Republic was also pretty far, but
Maybe
the food was good. Quality to price, definitely. This was the best.
Definitely that, yeah. And this is the Duomo and the famous cathedral that's attached to it with this nice monochromatic marble. It's really pretty. Very touristy spot, but very beautiful, definitely. And then we didn't have bikes anymore, so we took a train to Pisa because we got super cheap Ryanair flights out of Pisa to head back to Copenhagen. And showed up to Pisa, not excited at all, I would say, about Pisa, but actually had a great time. We really enjoyed Pisa. The Leaning Tower was leanier than we expected. Got to take silly photos with it. The whole area.
It was less crowded also. I think similar to Venice, we both had thought, like, we'd heard so much about it that we were assuming, oh, it's going to be this like crazy tourist attraction, and we were pleasantly surprised with that it felt worth going, and yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, I would say Bologna and Florence were packed. Venice was also kind of busy, but
still
I think
worth it.
It was sort of expected that Venice would be busy, but I had no idea that Bologna would be just full of tourists. It was crazy.
And the city center of Bologna felt very similar to Ferrara, so we were like, why don't people just go to Ferrara?
You just go to Ferrara, just get Bologna. But yeah, then we went to Pisa and just had a super nice time.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of relaxed. I think that, yeah, it was a little more vacation-y than some of our other spots because it was sort of the end where a lot of the trip we didn't know when the end would be. Whereas at this point we did know that we were on the end. And yeah, flew back to Copenhagen from Pisa and got our stuff out of the storage unit. We moved to Copenhagen with 2 boxes each, and then we left with 2.5 boxes each. So I think we did a very good job, and we did a fully self-moved move. It was a self-move, and this is sort of an idea of how we were able to do that. Was 2 backpacks and multiple boxes on each trolley. And we moved back to Seattle, where we are currently, and yeah.
We're excited to try to figure out what sort of bike touring to do in the U.S. Yeah, Max has been doing a great job still keeping the biking culture of Denmark, that if you have an errand to run, do it on bikes. Yeah.
But we're also maybe more excited about hiking right now, just because that's something that we didn't even have good access to in Copenhagen, whereas now we're living an hour from some amazing mountains. So
I should probably check out more of the Eurovelos. There's a wide range of how like complete each section is, so different Eurovelos probably completely different experiences, but they're good for offering like a backbone or skeleton of an outline of a trip, and you can kind of modify it from there to fit the type of bike you want to be on and the terrain you want to ride on. We used a lot of the Komoot app for route planning day to day.
So I think that's our Copenhagen to Florence bike trip recap video, and we hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned something about our experience. Thanks so much.
Bye!